talk to your kid. Don't sit down at the dining room table and say, now we're going to have a talk.
Youth that do gamble are 6 times more likely to develop an addiction as an adult.
You have this certain mentality, never my kid.
They shouldn't feel isolated for making a healthy choice.
For a safe, healthy, and drug-free community.
Watch Step Up to Save Our Children today.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Step Up to Save Our Children. If you're new to this or haven't been on, I am Denise Mayer. I am the founder and the director of Step Up Anderson Township. We are a coalition dedicated to a safe, healthy, and drug-free community here in Cincinnati, Ohio. We are attempting to meet you where you are, to educate you, parents, caregivers, concerned adults, on the dangers that are out there, including fentanyl poisoning, potency of marijuana right now, vaping, mostly nicotine and marijuana, and underage drinking. And then we connect those with all the mental health issues that go along with those. So this podcast today is on coaching and how important the coach is to the welfare mentally and physically of the teenagers and younger children out there. So my guest today is Christy Valentini Lackner, and she is a friend and also has a great bio that I will share. She is an Ohio certified prevention consultant with over 20 years of experience in the field of prevention. Prevention First is an organization that aims to change or influence multiple community conditions and circumstances to reduce community-level risk factors and increase protective factors. Christy graduated from Ohio University with a BA in psychology. Currently, Christy is the vice president of Ohio Prevention Professionals Association, formerly ADAPO. It's OPPA now. She is also the 2016 recipient of the ADAPAO Advocate Award. She's a member of the Ohio Behavioral Health Workforce Advisory Council and a member of the Ohio Youth-Led Prevention Brain Trust Group. She has experience working in schools, directing coalitions, and facilitating training and technical assistance opportunities. Building prevention capacity is her favorite part of her job. And I can't say enough about Prevention First, which Christy is with, because they have been just such a support to step up in trying to help us, help funding, to everything to get us going. So I so appreciate that support. So, well, welcome, Christy. And I want to hear all about the coaching. And I have your booklet here. I'm going to hold up for everybody. That's Coach's Playbook. One of the first things I got involved with and interested in, and the difference that coaches make in the lives of our young people. So, Christy, thank you for being on, and take it away.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for those wonderful, kind words about Prevention First. I consider myself lucky to be able to work for Prevention First, but more importantly, work with wonderful people like yourself and your wonderful coalition. And I am here as someone who played sports all throughout life, who's someone who was lucky enough to coach. I'm married to a high school math teacher who played football in high school and in college and coached for many, many years. But I have to be really honest and say that, most of my work and most of the experience I have comes on the end of relationship building and the research and the data that shows how important relationship is and how important relationships are between coaches and their athletes. And so I think what the pamphlet talks about, and then the work that Prevention First does, and those that are prevention professionals throughout the state of Ohio, it really focuses on how one positive adult can outweigh all the risk factors that we see in a young person's life. A risk factor is basically something that helps an individual make unhealthy choices, right? And we know that one positive adult outweighs those risk factors because research has showed time and time again, whether it's a coach, a mentor, somebody who's involved in a faith-based they are role modeling behaviors that that young person can role model and see and respect themselves. And number one, most important, are those coaches, right?
Right.
Competitiveness is important, winning is important, but the research says that if we really lean into coaching positively, we see more positive outcomes in the development of our young person's, personality, their self-esteem, their brain development, as well as winning on and off the field as well too. So we
Well, and it
really
starts early. Wouldn't you say it starts really early? I mean,
absolutely.
I was just at a flag football game for my 10-year-old grandson. And they really do such a great job for the most part at that level because the kids are still young and the coaches really want them to feel comfortable with what they're doing and, increase their skills at whatever sport it is. I think as we get into the older kids, the competitiveness, like you said, increases with every year. It seems that way anyway. And I've noticed that, some kids that are not as athletic as some of the others, need a little bit more encouragement and that type of thing.
Yeah.
Where when you get to the higher level, when you'll get there, is about, then are they good enough? Are they, then they're being picked. So I'm going to let you go with that. But I just wanted to say, I know that starts early. So
Yeah, it does. I love, watching my nieces and nephew, particularly play soccer when they're really little and they like all bunch up on like one part of the field, right?
beehive.
Exactly, right? Or,
Yeah.
my niece, when she plays T-ball and she's out in the back of the field, like picking the dandelions and making
Mhm.
a crown, right? Instead of paying
Right.
attention to where the ball is. But, I watch these coaches and, it's that tone of voice, right?
Mhm.
It's that appropriate, respectful behavior that, we can see even with those little ones, right?
Mhm.
I know my niece isn't paying attention, but the coach just gently reminds her, like, "Hey,
Right.
Ashlyn, ball
Right.
might be coming your way. Let's
Yeah.
get some eyes open,
Right.
right?" And then, as you said, just like you said, Denise, as they grow, continuing to model that appropriate, respectful behavior, that growth, and well-being in that person, not just that athlete, but that person as well.
Right.
Being consistent and say, calling them by their name. And I
Mhm.
think, one thing I want to say here is that we're human. We all make mistakes, right?
Right.
We
Right.
all in the moment. I have said things as a coach that I wished I could take back. My husband has. And I really respect the coaches that can say, "Hey, listen, in the moment, I said something that I probably
Shouldn't
shouldn't
have.
have
Right.
said," right?
Mhm.
As a coach, you're not expected to be perfect, but to be
No.
able to step back and say, "Listen, I apologize to the ref, or I
Mhm.
apologize to the parent, or I apologize to the other athlete. I
Mhm.
wish I would have handled it that way." That's coaching through positivity as well, and just as important.
Well, and I think too, back to your point of this being an important person in your child's life, we all sort of model the way things are in our minds from TV shows. And I could go way back, but that's because I'm super old. But you know what I mean? Like all the things that, mom, dad, boy, girl, great financial situation, great house. Everyone doesn't come from that.
Nope.
And
Nope.
so, when you think of parents, they're not all created equal and they're certainly not all educated the same way. So, what happens is you might have a lot of stress and trauma going on in a home, is my opinion, that they're bringing with them to school and to this sport.
Absolutely.
And, we don't know what's going on at home. The coaches don't know what's going on unless they've heard it, from some teacher or something like that. So, yeah, let's talk a little bit about that,
Yeah, I
Christy.
do. Yeah, I think, we all as human beings, even teeny tiny ones, we
Mhm.
bring everything with us when we come to play, right?
Right.
And so it might not be frustration that we can't hit the ball or we can't throw the ball or somebody, tackled us. It could be frustrations that are coming from, just like you said,
Mhm.
the home, lack of food, lack of stability,
Mhm.
struggling in school. And you are their safe place where they feel like they can release some of that, right?
Right.
And as a coach, it's really important to feel like you don't have to have all the answers to what do I do if I have a young person, but I know
Mhm.
what resources I can go to,
Mhm.
right? I can say, "Hey, I'll listen." Um, we can stay a few extra minutes and run laps if we want to, right? Or I know of this great resource. I know of Step Up Anderson's coalition that can give you wonderful resources and support you. Or, hey, I know somebody at the school that if you feel comfortable, maybe you and I can go and talk to too. You as a coach, you don't have to have all the answers, but just opening that dialogue and saying, I get it, I hear you, I see you. It has to feel stressful. It has to feel overwhelming. And this is a safe place for you to share that.
Right. And I have a story. I have a story
I
to share
know.
with you that
Yes.
I think is really good. It just proves that point. So there was a young man that was a club soccer player in high school. And his coach, I didn't know he was the coach, but anyway, was with our Anderson Chamber of Commerce. He's not now, but he was. And I was dropping off stuff from Step Up everywhere I could possibly drop it off. And I gave him a packet of information. I never thought anything more about it. And then he came up to me at a meeting and he said, I just want to give you a little thing about what happened with that, little backstory. And he said, I looked at it, I read it, and I isolated and figured out one of my kids on my soccer team was in trouble. And he said, and we were able to, he said, I reached out to him, I reached out to his parents, we talked and got him back on the right track. And because he was vaping, I think at the time, and pretty seriously vaping. So that coach went above and beyond what he had to do to reach out to that child and make a big difference.
I love that. I love that. I love that. And, depending on where that child is developmentally, if a middle schooler or a high schooler is the age that you're coaching, they're going to feel more comfortable interacting with you than they maybe would their guardians, their parents. So you have that special relationship where they might listen to you more than they might listen to mom or dad or grandma or grandpa or aunt or uncle. So I love that. I love it. And again, the coach didn't have to have all the answers, right? He had your resources. He had your ability to connect. He had that relationship. So I think you as a coach may not see yourself as somebody who is as important and as needed for some of these young kiddos, but you are, right? And I don't mean that as like a heavy weight on your shoulders, but just to recognize that they are watching you and they look up to you and they want to be like you. They want to make you happy and they want to make you feel proud, right? And so be careful with that in the words that you use and the relationships you seek out, right? We often talk about, if you're on a traveling team, what does that look like? As far as like, if something were to happen, what are your policies? What are your rules? What are your guidelines? And I think a lot of times it's important to know this going into coaching. If I have a young person that's vaping, if I have a young person who's drinking, if I have a young person who is self-harming or have thoughts of suicide, how do I handle that? What's my policy? What's my procedure? And if I know going into the season what that is, that's easier for me to lean into and have a little comfort level. I know for my husband who coached high school football, that was like, he was really nervous on handling those things, right? He lost a friend who completed suicide, and he always wanted to know what were the policies and procedures, just because it felt a little bit more a step-by-step process to him. And I think as a coach, again, I know if a kid is disclosing use to me, right? I know what to do. I know the steps that I need to take to protect myself and my team and this young person too, because that trust is really important. And they're not giving that trust to everybody. They're not giving that open dialogue. Yeah.
And it's a heady responsibility. I know as they get older and the kids are in more competitive things like high school football, for instance, the coaches have this need and to win and to prove that they've got a great program and all that type of thing. But I think the health and welfare of each individual student is their responsibility to a certain extent. So when they see things that need to be mentioned, and I'll just hit on one is, all of a sudden the lung capacity is not what it should be. They can't run down the field the way they used to. And things like that should be red flags to, I think, not only to the parents, of course, that's number one, but, to the coaches as well, because maybe the parents aren't watching them run down the field, but the coaches are, and they're seeing what's wrong with Johnny. He's not breathing right.
Yes.
Those type of things. And I do think there is a shared responsibility about that, to bring that to someone's attention and to talk to the child.
Absolutely. I think, Denise, you said so many wonderful things that I want to pull out on. I think the first thing is, one of the ways that you can approach this, especially with the not fully developed brain, is through that your ability as an athlete is going to be affected if you make these choices, right? Because sometimes when we have that young brain, they're in that rebellious, like, you can't tell me what to do, or that won't happen to me, or I'm too smart for that. But if you say, hey, from coaching science, from sports science, I can tell you, if you are choosing to vape, it will change your ability to be the best athlete you can be, right? That's a different approach, and that coaches can win some there, right? I think the other thing is, yeah, you are seeing their abilities change, and you might want to pull them aside and have discussions, but they're probably having conversations around you thinking that you're not listening and you're hearing, right? Like, I'm going to be doing this, or I can't wait to do this, or I tried this, or there's this party this weekend. And then as you as a coach, what is your responsibility to not ignore it, right? But interact with them and say, hey, do you think that's the best decision? What are some things? Could that affect your playing time? Could that affect your ability to be a part of this team, right? To be a leader on this team. And the other thing is, and I often get teased for this, and I'm okay with it. I am a very Ted Lasso type coach, right? My husband is a very Ted Lasso type coach.
Love Ted Lasso.
I think Ted Lasso is fantastic, right? And he is very much about, it is more important to develop the individual off the pitch, right? Off the field, rather than the win, right? And I think there can be a wonderful balance between developing the mind, the body, the heart, the soul of the young person, and being successful in winning, right? We know if we have an athlete who is feeling more self-confident, who is feeling like they are, growing and successful under their coach, they're more likely to be better on the field, and they're more likely to, win, right? So I think, when we're encouraging competition, or when we're encouraging to be better athletes, this all plays together, right? What decisions are you making on and off the field? What decisions are you making to post on your social media, right? Because sometimes that can get us into trouble, right? And
Absolutely.
as a coach, do I follow them on social media? Do I not follow them on social media? What is the policy and procedure for that? If I see something, how do I handle that? But even role modeling what I'm putting on social media, right? Or what I'm doing out in the public too, right? I'm not saying that you have to be like prohibitionist and, don't partake in things that you can legally take, but keep in mind, they're watching you. They're watching your social medias, and what are they saying, and what are you doing too? I think when we take on the coaching responsibilities, we're like, yeah, we're going to get on there. We're going to have them run some laps. We're going to do some practice swings, right? We're going to play some defense, and then we're done. It's over. But science says that coaching is so much more than that. Even
So
years
much
and
more.
years. My husband, his high school coach was that one positive adult, right? And he really credits that coach for getting him to where he is now. He doesn't think he'd be a teacher. He doesn't think he'd have his master's degree without the influence of this coach. And to this day, the love and admiration that you hear in my husband's voice when he talks about the coach is so important and is still there. So these are lasting relationships that stay with you. Now, this coach was fantastic. He taught my husband some bad habits as well, but luckily the good outweighed the bad.
Right.
I don't think that Chris, my husband, was the only positive effect he had as a coach. So know that, what you say, how you handle, how you approach life, it carries through with these young people. They're not just athletes, they're people.
No. And I think the expectations that the coach puts on the student athlete for, doing well in school and that type of thing, but also that they don't feel like this. So I was just saying this, that I have read that what you permit, you promote. And I love that line because it is very true for parents, coaches, anybody.
Yep.
And so when you get into bad choices with like vaping and the marijuana and that type of thing, and then you are on the practice field and it becomes aware to the coach that is going on, what are the policies that they need to adhere to so that, because the kids all know, come on, they all know who's doing what. And then they see that this kid is doing this and they think, well, and the coach knows it, that he's doing this, but then nothing happens, it's a big game. So he's in, whatever. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think this is so important. I'm so glad you brought this up. I think a lot of times coaches, they come from a good place where they're like, I don't want this young person to get in trouble, right? But what the research says, what the studies show is clear, consistent boundaries and consequences, right? No matter who that young person is, whether they start every single game, whether they've never started a game before, whatever your policy states, and please, please, please have a policy before you start any season. If you don't, you reach out to the coalition, reach out to Prevention First. We have policies that you can just take and use, but you stick to what that policy is, right? Now, there's some research out there that says, do we remove the young person from the team completely, or do we keep them on because that is a protective factor? That team is a protective factor, right?
Right.
Again, Ted Lasso coach here. I lean more to, yes, the young person is still there, but perhaps they can't practice. Perhaps they can't start. Perhaps they have to do some community service, right?
Mhm.
Maybe they have to do a small little report and report out, right? We don't want to share maybe with everybody what's going on in their lives, right? But let's find that balance in between removing, sticking with the consequence, sticking with that boundary and consequences, but still not letting them lose that connection and the support they have with their teammates, with their coach, with the stability of knowing what the schedule is, right? But
Right.
absolutely have a policy and procedure. My big thing is, you have to sit out 3 games. You can't dress, because not being in the uniform, being in street clothes.
Big
that
deal.
Yeah.
Big deal.
If you're wearing your uniform the day of to school to show, hey, I'm a part of the team, you can't do that, right? But you can still sit on the bench. You can't have your phone out. You can't be, participating in social media or all that, right? But you can't say, oh, I'm going to make an exception for this kid,
No.
or this is a really good kid. He was having a bad week, right?
Mhm.
You can say to that kid, hey, listen, I'm really proud of what you've done up to here, but I'm kind of disappointed in this decision, right?
Right.
I want you to know I still support you. I'm still proud of you, but I'm disappointed in this decision. But there has to be a consequence, and you can't avoid it or ignore it.
Well, because if there is no consequence, then it's permitted and, like I said, promote it. Then what happens is the other kids know that. And so they think, well, heck, he was at a party, he got drunk, whatever. And okay, the school knows it, but nobody's doing anything. Well, then open season, and I mean, it doesn't send the right message, I think.
Or if some people are punished, or some people have consequences and others don't, you're not fostering a team of, togetherness. And,
No.
it's just sending a message that, some people get away with it because of maybe where they live or who they know, and some people don't. So yeah,
Right.
absolutely. And the other thing is, you want it to be, I hate to use the word punishment, even though I just used it. You want it to be a learning opportunity, right?
Right.
If, and I think sometimes, particularly when we're talking about bullying, so we want to look at our young people, particularly those that are involved in sports in the middle school and the high school. We don't want them to bully, right? We want them to be the leaders. We want them to, really empower their peers, right? And so as a coach, I may not even recognize that that's my form of teasing, and maybe they're using that teasing outside of the field. So we have to have a moment of kind of reflection on what kind of I am too. I can be very, Christy myself can be very sarcastic and poke and poke and poke, right? That can be one of my love languages. But I have to remind myself that that's not appropriate to do in a coaching setting, because if they were to replicate that outside, that could be really mean and hurtful, right? So not only what are our policies for substance use or for mental health, but what are our policies with like bullying? What are our policies for, being a leader and being, open and positive to those, whether it's a community setting or a school setting or, a church setting in the sport that I'm playing.
Well, I noticed too, like with the student athletes, that there's just so much pressure. Some of it's self-inflicted, comes from themselves. Some is from their parents. And then some, of course, can be from the coach. And I said, when you add all that up together, my one granddaughter played soccer the whole time. And, but most of the children, the vast majority, are not going to go on to play college.
No.
And then the college, certainly a very small amount, we just watched the draft, are going to go on to the NFL or go on to, post college work. So some of the stuff that I think we sort of layer all over these kids is that they have to get to that next level, when most of them will not really have the athletic ability to do that. And I think that's where coaches really have to, they want to win. I mean, I'm at a school where they want to win.
Absolutely.
So, but, and I love it too. I mean, I have a grandson that plays on the team, and, everything is rah, rah and whatever, but, I worry I'm concerned all the time about their physical ability to do all the training and the lifting and all that stuff, because it can be detrimental. And then, and I'm also worried that, they don't get the position that they wanted, or they don't get a position at all, and how that's going to affect them mentally for going forward. And a lot of the athletes, not all, but a lot of them have a tendency not to get that 4.0. They're getting by. Hey, they're a big, football guy, and they don't have to do that. So you have to have the really smart ones to pull the thing up so that they can, everybody can compete. And I think that sometimes the coaches need to be more knowing and understanding that, like you said, it's the whole kid. Yep. And when they get out of high school and maybe not play any college, that's what they have, is that GPA.
Yep. And whatever foundation you gave them as a human being, right? So I really think, balance is key as a coach, right? There has to be balance between the fun and the skill development and the positive experiences and the winning, right? And you may be training a few students to go on and play at the collegiate level, right? But you are training the rest of that team to be good adults in life, right?
For the rest of their life.
Right?
Yep,
what
exactly.
I give my student athletes that I know won't go and play in college, but they will be able to find a career and a pathway that will be fulfilling to them, and they can give back, right? How can I teach them to be a good team player, right? To be, somebody who can be relied upon, somebody who is able to balance stress. And I think we're seeing a lot, even in professional sports, the understanding of mindfulness and meditation and stretching and breathing, because our young folks do have a lot of stressors in life, right?
They do. And this is a little side. My great nephew plays for the Raiders, and he experienced that, it's overwhelming stress last year, and it's really hard. And they're just kids when they get to that level. I mean, right out of college, and it's hard. And I think that we do overlook some of that, and because it's a rough sport, and you want to be tough, and the whole thing, and that we tend to forget that their heads are part of their body, and that they have to be able to deal with the stress that is out there. So tell me this, what would you advise parents, Christy, if their child is, well, obviously they're very young and the coach doesn't seem to be balancing out the team as much. I know there's rules. I was a soccer coach back in the day, way back, for little kids. Yeah, for little kids, and did it for a long time. But there's rules about how much they have to play back then. They have to play a certain amount of the game and all that, no matter what the sport is, I think. But I don't know when that changes. And then maybe middle school, that they don't, and they ride the bench. And, I know a young girl that was on the JV and then also on the varsity soccer, and she went to every practice, she worked out, she did everything, and she never got in a game. To me, that is horrific. And I blame the coach for that. I'm sorry, but I do. And I think that's awful. If you're part of the team, you're part of the team. You need to be at least put in for some plays and that type of thing. So if you're a parent that's seeing that, for instance, what would you advise parents to do?
Yeah, I think unfortunately coaches are under a lot of pressure to win, right? They have a small amount of time to show that they are worthy of being a coach in that position before they move on. They're fired, they're let go.
Right.
So I recognize that they're under pressure and that they have their own set of well-being that they need to take care of, right?
Right.
I think as a parent, the first thing is I have a conversation with my young person, right? So, all right, do you feel left out? Do you want to play? I had some student athletes that they wanted to be part of the team, right? They didn't even care. They recognized that maybe this wasn't their best skill set, but they love the camaraderie. They love the travel. They love the uniform. So you want me to say something, right? And then if the student athlete feels comfortable enough and says, yeah, I want to, maybe encourage your young person to speak first, right? And, if they speak and they feel like it didn't get anywhere, they didn't really feel comfortable, just having a conversation, with a coach, maybe even through an email, just, hey, just looking for maybe like a couple of minutes in a game, right? Or is there anything that my kid can do? Or what are you looking for? What's going on
Well,
here?
to increase their self-esteem,
Right, right, right.
Exactly.
If it's prioritizing winning over well-being, then I get really nervous, and I'm like, maybe that athlete shouldn't even be there, right?
Right.
If it's favoritism, that's a conversation that we can have, about, sometimes there's things that we just can't do, and if it's a lack of feedback, if it's dismissal of concerns, then maybe we can say things like, hey, listen, if you want to stay on the team to be with your friends, that's great. But is there another opportunity? Is there a church league or a rec league or somewhere else that you might be getting playing time that you can go to? But I think the most important part is empowering your young person to feel like they have the say so. Do you want
That's so
to talk?
important.
Yeah.
Christy, that is so important. I'm so glad you said that, because I think what parents have a tendency to do when they feel their child is not getting a fair shake, whatever, is to go off on the coach, which then makes it worse for the child. So, it's
Yes.
like,
Yes. Yeah.
so yeah, because I have seen that in action sometimes. And
Yeah.
it's like, that's really not the right way to handle it. And you're not empowering the child to take responsibility for something that's not right in their life. You're letting the helicopter mom or dad
Yeah.
do it instead. And I think that's not a good idea for a
Yeah.
lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah. Those conversations can be really difficult to have even as an adult, right? So if we support our young person in saying, okay, there's no right or wrong way to do this. If you want to stay after practice, if you want to write an email, ultimately, if we feel like things are maybe not safe mentally or physically for our young people, we could elevate it to the athletic director,
Right.
or, if there's a board. But, in some cases, this is, we're not going to see, we have to understand as a parent, we're not going to see the full result that we want. And so how are we supporting our young kid in that decision, right? I
Right.
think the same conversation we have with coaches about role modeling appropriate language and behavior and support, we as parents could do a better job at,
Well,
right?
100%.
Right,
Yes.
right.
Yes.
So, I have been to many of games where there have been many a parent or grandparent or aunt or uncle or older sister that have been, it's just a t-ball game, right? This is not the place to be, so
Screaming.
adamant about calling out
Right.
the little pitcher's deficiencies, right?
Right.
Right.
And even
And
the ref. Yeah. And sometimes,
it's
because
just
a lot of
a
times
volunteer.
the refs are kids too. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, I have often had to maybe walk and get, a soda, right? So that I don't say things that I want to say, right? And I think the things that, as somebody who likes to be involved in, watching my nieces and nephews grow, and we have to role model that. They may be really, really angry when they get in the car, and how do we work that out, right? Like, you still have to shake hands. You still have to,
Right.
acknowledge that we're not perfect individuals. So it's not limited to just the coaches knowing that this is, the growth of the young person, but us as parents and aunts and uncles and, adults that are champion young people need to kind of, be understanding of those as well. So there,
And that starts so young. You know what I mean? Like, and it more culminates like at the football games in college, where everybody is, tailgating and acting like, morons and stuff like that. And the kids are like then acting like, but that's happening in high school play too. They have, some tailgating and that's orchestrated by parents. More than the kids for sure.
Yeah.
But I don't think that high school Friday Night Lights is, the best thing for parents to be drinking or having a beer and, whatever. I think it's like losing sight of what the athleticism and the competitiveness that's healthy. It doesn't relate very well. I don't think we've had discussions about that in our coalition where, you're at a Friday night high school game and parents are drinking, it just really does. I don't think it sends the right message at all. And, yeah.
Yeah.
But what signs, go ahead.
No. You were going to ask me what
I was going to say, what signs would you, if you were, I did a presentation for the coaches a while ago out here. And one of the things is to get them to understand what kind of things they're looking for when they suspect or have heard something that one of their kids is doing, vaping or doing something. We talked about they can't run down the field the way that they
Right.
were,
Right.
but all things don't affect the lungs. They can be
True.
affecting a lot of things. And you just wonder if we educated coaches. And I did a thing on lacrosse out, and I don't even know where that was. It was very far away. Talk to their coaches about it too. There are definite signs that they need to be looking at when they
Absolutely.
suspect something's going on. Do you want to talk about that a
Yeah.
little bit?
Well, I think the first thing I would encourage is, if you could do a training for, all of your coaches, whether it's a school district, like I said, or for QPR, I'm a huge fan of QPR. QPR only takes, 30, 45, 60 minutes. It's question, persuade, referral, right? But really it's getting comfortable with asking the questions. Are you thinking about hurting yourself? Do you have a plan? But it also kind of talks about signs and symptoms, right? So is the young person's personality changing? Is it different, right? Are they more boisterous where they were kind of more quiet before? Or switch that, where they really kind of outgoing, the center of attention, and now they're quiet and reserved, right?
Right.
Are they not showing up to practices? Are they late? Are they staying after and look like maybe they don't want to go home, right? Their appearance, right? Maybe before they were kind of very into being very put together for practice, right? Hair in a ponytail, makeup done, nails done, right? Or, crisp, clean shoes, socks on point, everything ironed and put together. And now they're very disheveled, right? Maybe even there might even be an odor, right?
Right.
Maybe they're talking about how they just are tired. They just feel like they can't do it. Maybe they can't complete the exercise or complete the activity. Maybe they're being mouthy and they've never really been mouthy before. These are all
Right.
signs that something's going on. And it doesn't have to be big, huge, right? But it just might warrant a conversation like, hey, Joe, this feels a little different. What's going on here? What is there something at home? Is there something in school? Are you feeling not so great? What's going on here? Right? I'm worried about you. I'm concerned. And with young people, they may not immediately answer that question, right? And that's okay because what we've done is we've opened the door. So maybe later they text us and say, hey, coach, I was just thinking about what you asked me and I wanted to share something. Or maybe the next practice they feel a little bit open, right? So don't expect an immediate response to that question and be okay with it, right? Unless you think that the young person is in immediate danger.
Immediate danger, right.
Yeah, then we're going to do something different.
Well, and you're building a trust between the athlete and the coach. So the last thing that unless it's immediate, like you said, something really serious right away, the coach has to, I think, has the responsibility to keep that private, whatever the student told them, unless it's something that they really need, like you said, death by suicide, that's something else. But, if they suspect they're vaping or they whatever, the last thing that they need to do is rat on the child to the parent. That has to be an initiation of more and more conversations to see where that student really is and how they can help or push them in the right direction, because they'll never go back to that coach again if the coach just, throws up the red flag and says, hey, we got a problem, and then responds to the principal or to, the disciplinarian person at school. I mean, that would never work.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to take those steps without letting the young person know, right? So if I were concerned that there was vaping or bullying or, mental health concerns, I would say, hey, listen, I am mandated by law to report. I'm worried about you. I would much rather you be safe and mad at me than, something bad happened to you. So here's what I'm going to do. We can do it together. I can let you know exactly what's happening, but I want you to be healthy and safe. And I want you to be, in a space where people are taking care of you. So can I give you some options? Do you want me to A, go to your mom, B, go to your grandma, C, go to the counselor? Do you want me to, connect you with some cessation programs? How do we want to handle this? Because you are important to me and I want you to be happy and healthy. But yeah,
And you're
definitely
putting,
don't take those
right.
steps without letting that person know. You don't want to surprise
Right.
them with talk. They don't want to be called down to the AD's office and be like, hey, wait. I was just having a conversation with coach. I really felt like we were just talking, that's what I thought. So absolutely have those conversations.
Yeah. And I think, that it takes a lot for a kid to bring this up to a coach or bring it up to anybody if there's trauma at home or there's something that, they're embarrassed about or whatever. But I know for a fact there was a child on the football team that was, I think, let go because of severe marijuana use, cannabis. And that comes with super blood eye shot, bloodshot eyes.
Yeah.
And all the kids know it. I mean, they talk about it. They see it. If they see it and they know about it, the coaches probably have to know about it too.
Yeah.
And I think the responsibility to take some kind of action is imperative for the
Absolutely.
welfare of the child.
And I would also think, when we were talking about once you're done with high school, if you played sports your whole life and you're like, what do I do now? I think there should be some planning and some roles of coaches about how we handle that too, right? So here, this kid, he's now been let go from the football team. That might have been a source of comfort or a space where he felt like he could be himself. What other supports can we offer this young person, right? And then for our high school athletes that are transitioning into a world where they're not really going to play this competitive sports anymore, there's a gap, there's a hole.
There is.
I want coaches to understand that playing a sport is a coping skill, right? It is a coping skill. And so if that coping skill is no longer there, what other positive coping skills can we give to support these individuals? Can they play rec sports? Can they coach? Can they, referee officiate? What can they do to continue this positive coping strategy?
I agree. And I think that's where college is important, that they offer the kids more, just intramural kind of, that they play and do things like that, because if that's their love and they're good at it and that's where they're getting their self-esteem, just to let that go by the wayside, like you said, that whole protective factor, which is huge, just goes by the wayside. Now I'm off to college and, Yeah. And I think that's even true of the college kids. I was watching the draft and, I look at all of those kids that maybe didn't get, those are just the top of the echelon of all the college players that are getting to do that. But, some that thought they were going in the first round went in the seventh. I mean, you talk about gut punch for some of those kids.
And you're doing that on a stage in front of millions and millions
of people. I know.
Yes. So how do you mentally strengthen yourself and prepare yourself for that, right?
Yeah.
And I know, a lot of it is leaning back on your support system, and you as a coach are a part of the young person's support system, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what is so important. I always say to the grandkids, you pay now or you pay later, meaning school, that you want to make sure that you've got options and things like that. And I think that it's just as important for the kids who are not necessarily the star of the team and maybe not the star of the ACT, that they have a support system. And we know that families are the number one influencer, moms and dads and that type of thing. But like we started off with, all moms and dads aren't created equal. They come from very different places. They come from very different educational backgrounds. Some of them are working 2 jobs. They don't have time to do some of the things that some of the other parents do. So I know. I worry about kids. And my husband kind of laughs at me that I'm worried about the one that didn't get picked first round at the draft, and now he's the 7th. And and he said, "What are you talking about?" But I still worry about him. I worry about all those kids because they are kids.
I think we as a society can use this as a great conversation that you can't tie your self-worth to winning or a number that somebody arbitrarily picks you at, right? You are more than just the 7th round pick to the Browns, right? You are more than the first.
Yeah, you knew. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
You are more than that. You are a whole person who is kind off the field, who is,
so many
funny,
gifts to give.
Right. You are more.
Yep.
Yes, you have this one talent and skill, and people should have recognized it much earlier, right? Or people should have understood that you come with a dad that's very vocal, right? I think a lot of us athletes come with parents that are very vocal, right?
Oh,
But
100%.
you are more
For
than
sure in
vocal.
college.
Yes.
I'd say absolutely in college, but I think high school too.
Yes.
You know, this is my son and he's going to be the next greatest, you know,
Right.
whatever. And,
He's going to be the best.
you know, and the pressure that is put on these student athletes is unbelievable. It really is.
It is.
And then, you know, now that they're getting into all this stuff where the coaches are the college coaches and they have to see the whole person, like you said, but then you're bringing in, now they're getting paid,
Money,
you know, for
yes.
all this stuff. And then they're bringing in, the media is trying to interview them. And I mean, you know, I look at these little kids running around playing flag football yesterday and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I'm sure none of them will probably even play high school, but you're starting at that point to build confidence within them and that they are worth something and that they have a lot of options ahead. But showing up, working hard, doing all those things are really important.
Yes.
So
and one girl that you mentioned that never got a minute of playing time. I hope somebody in her life acknowledged how strong of character you have to be to do that.
I think
how
so.
Determined and hardworking and dedicated.
Yep.
Those are strengths that a lot of people don't have. And
They
you should
don't.
be so proud. You came every day. You worked every day. And just because you didn't play a minute doesn't mean that you weren't a strong person on a part of that team, right? And I acknowledge and I see you and I am proud of you for not giving up. Some people would have been like, why would I even show up, right? I'd rather stay home and, you know, be on TikTok, right? But this young person was like, nope, I'm going every single time. And that is so important and refreshing.
It is. And I just hope that, you know, most kids, not all, will be able to find that one person that can make all the difference in the rest of their lives. And if it's a coach, which often it is, because they look up to them and they want to please them and they want them to be proud of them, that they realize some of these things that we talked about and bring them to the game or the practice and whatever else that, you know, that wherever they're interacting with these young people, because it can just make all the difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. Be silly, have fun, you know, be goofy every now and then, you know, show that you can be, you know, serious and dedicated to the craft, but that you can also have fun and acknowledge that we're all human beings and we can be goofy and we can take time to, you know, not focus on winning and still be successful athletes.
Right.
So,
well, we're coming up on a stop here. I can't thank you enough, Christy, for being on and talking to us. Your pamphlet that is with Prevention First is awesome. And we got a lot of these early on and got them out to all the coaches and things like, you know, that. And we did some presentations about it because I just think it's so important. And the older they get, in my opinion, the more important it is. You know, little kids are going to get hugged and loved after their game by their parents or grandparents, anybody that's come, and hopefully somebody has come. And, you know, but when they get older, it becomes less and less unless they're like on a winning team where the whole family's going to show up or whatever, but that's not the majority. So it's just important to share these things, I think. And I so appreciate you being on and talking about this. And
thank you for having me.
Yeah. And if parents, I want to talk about Prevention First, that your website is www.prevention-first.org. There's so many resources on there, and I'm sure coaching is probably on there. I don't know.
It is.
Is it? Yeah. So many good things on there that you can learn about and find all kinds of things, including podcasts and everything else, but that we can, you know, all share and help each other. So
absolutely. Oh, golly, yes. Resources are available and absolutely. So, well, thank you so much for having me. And
absolutely. It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure.
Congratulations on your award. I see it behind you. I love it. I love that it's behind you there. So
my award from from Prevention First is right there. In fact, I polished it before the podcast. Make sure you didn't have too many fingerprints on it.
I love it. Beautiful. Perfect.
It is. It's a beautiful award, actually.
Well deserved. So
thank you very much. I appreciate that. Well, I'm going to let you go and I'm going to do my exit here like I always do.
I'm going to hang on up and I'll talk to you soon.
Oh, thank you so much, Christy.
Thank you.
So thank you all for listening. You can see these podcasts on YouTube, social media, of course, including Facebook, Instagram, X, and LinkedIn. You can also access them on our website, which is www.stepupanderson.org. All of our podcasts are on there, as well as lots of resources for recovery and specific substances. You can get on there and find probably just about anything you need, but you can also reach out to us. And I'm so happy to connect you with whatever would be of help to you. So please share this podcast. And I don't want to beg for subscriptions for people to subscribe, but please do, because that helps us to get the funding that we need to continue these podcasts. And go back and look at some of the other ones, because we've covered a lot of great things. And I believe our next one is all on college experience. So thank you all, and you have a great day.